never go to something, so deeply appreciate the attendance. How did it get started?
Yeah.
It's not a very interesting story, which is unfortunate because it's always people's first question.
Right. Well, it just seems like such a crazy thing to pitch.
Yeah,
So-
and it was, but you have to remember during the height of 2020 pandemic, crazy ideas suddenly made a lot of sense.
Right, right.
We weren't seeing people, and it was really just like every idea that the movie is was a response to everything that the band was saying we don't want. We don't really want to participate in a movie about ourselves that seems corny. We don't really want to just tell our story in the movie. We really don't want the movie to just be about how good people think we are.
Yeah.
So everything was a response to that.
Right.
Well, if you don't want to be in it, then we should cast people to play you. If you want to introduce people to music, then there should be a musical element in it so that you can watch people in the movie learn the songs.
Right.
Just as a way of molecularizing what these songs are, because an average movie would have critics and musicians explain to the camera what this music is. And this had to just not be that.
Right.
It had to be anything but that. Right. Have people learn these lyrics one word at a time. Have bands that were inspired by the band play the music instead of just talk about it.
Right.
Every idea was just a response to something I was asked not to do.
Okay, yeah.
So it became, I was asked not to do a lot, so that's why there's so many ideas, is that I had to keep adding ideas to keep avoiding everything. But then the trick of it is, the band says we don't want to be interviewed in the movie.
Yeah.
That's boring. And I said, I agree, that is boring. You see that in documentaries all the time.
Right.
It's fine. I wouldn't want to do that for a month, chasing everyone down.
Right.
So then we do a museum, because every movie you see, it has B-roll, essentially, of ephemera, B-roll of posters, of the guitar. And you figure that stuff is shot against a black curtain, and that seems really boring also.
Right.
So I thought, let's just make that a whole thing. And then you get the band in there. And I hired an actress to play a newscaster. And I just said, they don't know that you're here. But they know that we're filming this, obviously. Just get in their face and start asking them questions. And through that, we got every on-camera soundbite from them that they said they would never do. But
It's like a trick into the
it
movie
is, but
that they don't want to make.
But it's done in a way that it doesn't seem.
Right.
It seems neither boring nor like a betrayal,
Right.
because it's a new idea of how to capture information.
Right.
And you have people like Spiral, whose response to the museum is extremely emotional, and everyone's there with their families. And then you have Malcolmus, whose response to the museum was to isolate some of the phony elements that I narrativized and just goof on them. And that was really rewarding, that they basically just did the thing.
Right.
But they didn't say we don't want to talk. They said we don't want to sit down and be interviewed.
Right.
So what if I fill a room up with like 700 people and have an actress pump you for information?
Yeah.
And that's it. You get like 10 minutes out of it.
Right.
That's all you need.
Right. Was there an element that was harder to mount than the others, do you feel like?
Yeah, well, if I introduce the movie, I'll introduce it now. What I usually say is, you don't need to know anything before you watch something, but the thing you should know before you watch this is that it's the hardest movie, it was the hardest movie anyone's ever made.
Yeah.
And I mean that, and I really feel like that does help people watch the movie. Hopefully that was obvious, but I feel like because a lot of the movie's visual language presents as actual documentary,
Right.
you're forgiven for not even thinking for 1 second that the actual documentary moments of this museum or of the musical are documenting an entirely fabricated circumstance that the director of the movie had to build from the ground up. So the movie was like if you had someone over for dinner and you made them 5 entrees and nothing else.
Right.
And they'd be like, what an odd choice you've made. You sure you didn't want to just like steam something or like throw something in the oven to bake by itself? And
Right.
you're like, no, 5 very complicated different entrees. And that's what the movie was like. So everything was like feast or famine. Slowly building a museum, we're assembling these pieces, some of which are fake, most of which are real. And it's open for 4 days. during those 4 days, I had nothing to do. I just sat there and watched people come in.
Right.
And then the day that we had the event with everything, I had a lot to do. But I didn't have to like direct a single camera. Just told all 7 camera people, like, just film everything.
Yeah.
And that was really hard, but it was really fun.
Right.
And then we filmed 15 minutes of the movie in 4 hours, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And then we made an entire musical.
Yeah,
And then we made an entire movie. Like,
I was curious if one of those felt like much more of a project.
well, they were incredible. Each one was it was a main course. You'd be forgiven for just doing that.
Right.
It was lunacy. The entire process was just one baffling decision after another.
Yeah.
All being made for almost exactly 50% of the initial budget we had thought we would need for the movie.
Right.
So it was all being done basically at half off, and we did like 5 movies. But, you know, like, it's just boring stuff. Is it hard? Like, yeah, you look at the actors in the scripted segment. You can make like an indie movie with those 7 actors.
Right.
It would be really hard to get them all on the same schedule. And we did it for 5 days, which is criminal to do that much work to get those actors in the room together.
Right.
Less than a week. And we did that. And I don't regret it, but I certainly did at the time.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any piece of it you regret? Is there any piece of it that you feel like, yeah, I don't want to say not proud of, but you know.
No, I mean, it's just all different. Everything was, I mean, the movie stuff, the range life stuff is boring on purpose.
Right.
So like shooting those scenes was tedious because it's just the most boring thing in the world.
Right.
His coverage, we need to get this line, we need to get him entering the room. It's just the most boring thing in the world.
Yeah.
And it's what most movies entirely are made of. Except by that point, we'd spent 1.5 years doing everything but.
Right.
And now I was doing the most one-dimensional thinking I had done on the entire project.
Now you've tricked yourself into doing the thing that you didn't think you'd be doing.
Yeah, just like making something flat, but really like the evolution of the range life stuff speaks to the evolution of the project. That was the last thing we did.
Right.
And movies change while you're making them. Documentaries really change while you're making them, hopefully. So, okay, if we'd gotten the full amount we wanted, the range life script was 45, 50 pages long. There's like maybe 9 minutes of it in the movie. But initially the plan was to film all 45 pages, 35 millimeter normal scenes. We didn't have enough money for that. The actors were only going to be able to get half the time we needed. But by then we had made the musical. We had made the museum, and we'd seen that the process, the rehearsals of the band was as interesting to us as their triumphant return to the stage. The rehearsals for the musical became very valuable. So then it became clear that the solution, both financially and creatively, for the biopic was the process of this should be the movie.
Right.
Rather than just showing these scenes, which we know are not going to be exceptional because they're written in cliche terms, let's show the table read, let's show the auditions, let's show the vocal coach, let's show the trip to the Whitney to get into character, let's show all the stuff that we hadn't even thought we would do.
Yeah.
But now we just don't have the money to do everything else. So here's a creative solution to make this final shoot part and parcel with the other shoots we've done. So now the movie, if you edit it correctly, 2/3 of it can be about processes coming together. Rehearsals for a tour, rehearsals for a show, rehearsals for a movie, getting into character for a movie, and then there's a point in the movie, which in the film edit is 4 separate split screens, where it's opening night of the musical. It's their first show back after 12 years.
Yeah.
It's opening day of the museum. And it's the sort of climactic moment of the movie starting. And realizing that we could build up to a segment that unilaterally has the same arc was like a thing you learn when you make something for 4 years,
Yeah.
which is too long.
Right.
Way too long.
Right. I'm going to open it up. Does anybody have any questions? Right here.
Yeah, I'm a musical theater person myself. I'd love to know more about what the actual, like, I'm not familiar with the musical outside of the film. What was the, like, basic plot line of that musical outside of the song?
So the question, just so the back of the audience can hear, what was the basic plot line of the musical?
Yeah, well, that's another, not to just talk about all the things that the movie wasn't, but initially the idea for the musical was that it would basically tell the story of the band as like a working class musical, like the musical of the movie Billy Elliot. And like the story is like small town, people want to escape their small town and they escape through music. And that seemed like a relevant way of sort of pre-framing the band's story. But then again, by the time the movie's coming together, I realized we're telling the band's story other ways, and we don't need it told multiple times. Because by the time we're doing it, we've unlocked this treasure trove of archival material that we initially didn't know if we could count on. So I figure now the musical can't tell that. And what's the most cliche thing anyone would ever say about any piece of material? It has to have heart. So I just thought this could be a very simple show, all told through lyrics. There's no speaking in the show, it's just all lyrics. And it featured about 35 songs, some for 4 lines, some for the entire song, about a guy and a girl who are together, and he's a musician, and then his dreams come true, and he moves to New York, and then he meets another musician, and then through the songs of Pavement, these two relationships begin to be a tug of war. And of course, for my like analytical brain, it was told chronologically. And the musical starts with "You're Killing Me" and ends with the end of the movie, with a medley after the Terror Twilight segment of the musical. So it was like a long process of extracting what lyrical passages from the entire catalog in order could tell a story. And you know, because so many of Pavement's songs are self-reflexive about being in a band, about your friend, you know, the song All My Friends was really prominent in the show, which is not in the movie at all. Tonight, all my friends are strangers. Like that was a big refrain in the show. And it just became like this kind of love triangle piece where the main character ultimately ends up alone. And I made this entire thing, and I wrote this, and we had a dozen people working on this for 2 months, knowing that nothing I just said will be apparent in the movie. And I kept saying to these performers, like, they had asked me 2 questions at the same time, and I'd say, one of those is user's choice, because I don't care. Because I've never done theater before, and I want you to interpret this as you will. The other thing bumps up against what I need for the movie, so that we have to talk about. And I knew that the plot of the musical would be inscrutable in the movie at best, and just absent at worst, and that's what it ended up being. And that's fine, because you could also just think that it's a review. It's a plotless, experiential performance of great music. And even if it was that, you would think I would watch that, hopefully. So that just like, that's the sort of challenge of the amount of stuff that we did that isn't, it's not even in the movie, we didn't even film it. Like we filmed the musical, but we were filming musical rehearsals 5 days a week. We only filmed 2 days. Yeah. So we're there and we're doing all this work, and I say we're making a movie. And then the cast says that there's no cameras. And it's like, exactly, this is the dream. We're making a movie with no image. We're rehearsing, we're talking, you're getting better every day, we're discussing music, we're discussing the meaning of this, and we're not filming it. We'll film it on Wednesday and Friday. So on those days, like, look your best. Even though we're rehearsing, come with like makeup and nice clothes on, and everyone did. And then the scenes of, you know, like this is the process of this movie. It's like, this is just like the tip of an iceberg. And, you know, but we have the show, like it exists. It could put up again. We have like the whole thing filmed, obviously.
I remember reading a glowing, was it New York Times review?
Well, there's a New Yorker piece about it that we then put the headline of in here just to prove that we really did it. Like by and large, people thought it was fun.
Yeah, I remember reading it and not knowing you were making this movie.
That's right,
so interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I hope that answers your question. I love musicals.
Right here. So the question, to try to sum it up, was about the relationship for Pavement between carelessness and sincerity. And you've added this extra layer, so I'm curious if you discovered anything about the sincerity of Pavement through the 4 years of making it.
Well, you got at an important tension within the project and within the fandom of this band, which now spans 30 years, 35 almost now. Which is, if you talk to, and this sort of led me to the plurality of the title. If you talk to 100 Pavement fans and say, just name 3 words that come to mind when you think of why you love this band, you would get 100 different answers, which is not true of many artists. A lot of people, you go to a Metallica show, you wouldn't get 100 different answers. You'd get a lot of the same answers. And I genuinely think, or I know for a fact now, you talk to one person and they say, what I love about Pavement is their detached irony, their lack of ambition. And then you talk to someone else and they say, what I love about them is the absolute emotional sincerity of Malkmus's lyrics and how hard he works to be a great musician. And what people love about the band is just completely contradictory, person to person. And the movie had to be that. It had to be contrasting just absolute sincerity, which a lot of his lyrics read as, and that's what musical theater reads as, with absolute sarcasm, slacker irony, which the biopic reads as. But the joke of this is that he always worked hard. The band always worked hard. Not as hard as they could have, but really hard. And the movie had, we worked hard to make the movie. Not that hard, but it just took a long time. But we're never working on it 6 months at a time every day. And the movie has to embrace the fact that, for me at the beginning, the unanswerable question was, does Malkmus actually care about his legacy? Does he care about his genius? Does he care about his craft in the way that his fans really need to believe he does? Because he would never admit to any of this. He would admit to saying, I want to be the best musician I can be. But it would, if you really said, do you feel like you're a generational spokesperson for him? He wouldn't even answer it. And that's the core tension. And, even shooting, Jason says, do you think he acts like this with his kids? Do you think his kids come to him with a problem and he's just I don't know, or do you think he really engages with them in a normal way? And fortunately, I was able to learn the answers to all of this, and it's unsurprising that he cares so much until he doesn't. And I feel like that's just the obvious answer. Is that's kind of it. I don't know. I did kind of learn that, but I still couldn't put my finger on it, because he's a perfectionist, and you see that in the rehearsals, is that they wanted this tour to be better than any tour they'd ever done. And it was, I feel, by and large, and that was the response. But then also, there would just be nights where someone would say, he just was, not feeling it tonight. And it's it shows. So you can still fall short, but that's kind of the fascinating conundrum. And that was on the table for me day one when I was doing interviews with everybody, trying to get at the core of what is the thing we need to answer. And it's still on the table, because I don't think the movie answers it, because it is unanswerable. But to me, and to Robert, the film's editor, who is the world's #1 Pavement fan, according to himself, that tension is the thing. The tension is a 90-second punk song, Serpentine Pad, played next to a perfect 3-minute pop song, Gold Sounds, played next to a 6-minute jam song. 3 songs that don't sound like they should be at the same show or by the same band, and yet they are, and the show is perfect. And that weird kind of study of contrast is what the movie needed to be, which was convenient because we already planned all these contrasting segments.
We have time for a couple more. I'm going to go right there. Yep.
So it's incredible the scope of things that you included in this documentary. You had the biopic, you had the reunion show, you had the musical, and it all seemed like they had slightly different visions and said slightly different things about Pavement's message and role in the world. So in your view, what did each of those projects challenge? How did each of them
So the question was about the different projects and how did each of them challenge you and what kind of opportunities each of them provide to the documentary?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a continuation of what I was just saying, which is that the entire project just became this multifaceted examination of plurality. And the musical, which the band unabashedly thinks is cool, because it has nothing to do with them as individuals. And they like that I was able to find something about their body of work that can truly be detached from who they are as people, and to create something that's a celebration of music and lyrics without any interrogation of personalities. And they think that that is kind of the best version of telling their story, because they're, you could say humble, or you could just say completely average working class guys who don't to this day understand why anyone would watch a 2-hour movie about them. And the musical was interesting because we thought that they might just hate it and think it was ridiculous. And even seeing the movie, Malcolm's response is just, I never would have thought that that would work. But I was like, I knew that would work. I don't know how, I didn't do the arrangements, I would never be able to do that. And the same with the biopic, which was a sort of really intentionally flat and clumsy attempt to dramatize a story that resists dramatization. So you look at 10 years of a band. April '95, the release of While He's That Way Up Through Lollapalooza, is the only time anything literally interesting happened to Pavement. Everything else was writing some songs, recording an album, touring. That's not interesting. That's just good if you like the music. So finding something that you could even attempt to embellish was a fun challenge. And of course, we all knew the mudflinging, sort of legend. But the more I asked everyone, it wasn't just that one bad day. It was an entire tour of Malcolm is making this opportunity incredibly difficult. And I felt like that was a compelling opportunity to really dial in on like a phony baloney sense of heightened what if drama. So yeah, if you're approaching things differently, it's like, how do we tell this in a way that is scripted but seems bad on purpose? And how do we tell this segment in a way that looks like it's a documentary but is actually really meticulously planned out by me, just stopping only shy of literally being written? And as a study of legacy and history and musicianship and celebrity and friendship, I just felt like most things make the mistake of assuming that whatever story you're trying to tell can be flattened into a one-dimensional, easily digestible, every scene's the same, every movie's the same, no matter what subject it's about, kind of project. But I felt like the band warranted a prism. And then the challenge was like, how do you actually make that make sense rather than seem like, well, that's a good idea. It doesn't work for this band at all. Like people say, well, would you make this do something else about a band. Would you make it like this? And it's like, well, no. A, that would kill me. And B, it would only make sense for this band to do this. And, it just had to be. That was the thing.
We have time for one more. I'm going to go right here. Yes. So the question was, there was a moment in the musical portion where one of the main guys says, I just love them so much, I'll do anything. And this audience member was wondering if that's how you felt.
No. And that was my greatest asset and also my greatest armor against the extra year and a half that this project took, because the tension in our post-production process between myself and Robert Greene, again, film's editor, world's biggest Pavement fan, self-professed, is that they are his favorite band. And that is his approach on this movie. Whereas my approach was, this is a band I really like. And I paid money to see them in 2010 on the reunion tour because I thought that I never would. But for the sake of what we're doing, I think that they're more interesting than they are great, for my sake, as a storyteller. And that's exactly what is the greatest asset, I think, of making this movie. Because if the director's approach is, my entire point of this is, this band is great, and I want the movie to scream that at you, then the movie is worthless, I feel. And that is true of many, you see a lot of these, like you can tell the reason that the person made the movie is because they just love the person or the subject so much, they don't care about anything else other than getting close to them and getting to be the one who makes the movie. And I think my asset, as we debated, the first cut of the movie was 3 hours long. What do we lose was like, oh, but this moment is so iconic and they look awesome in it. And I was like, who cares? It's redundant. We have 3 other moments like that. Like, that's for nerds. People have seen that. It's on YouTube. Cut it out. Yeah. And and Robert, a diehard fan, and the label's like, oh, but we need that. And I'm like, guys, it doesn't matter. Like, we have so many things that hit that same beat. And it was a lot of that. And I just felt like my interest was not laudatory. My interest was intellectual and narrative, again, which is what they wanted. If they wanted somebody to just make the legacy trap puff piece, they would have found that, but they didn't want that. And that's a credit to them. And it gave me the freedom to just kind of do the simplest thing I could imagine, which is like take a stab at immortality by making something that had never been done before and could never be replicated. Yeah. Did everybody catch the various Philadelphia stuff in the movie? Was anybody at the Khyber Pass show that is in the movie where he's wearing the red shirt? And then the Philadelphia Record Exchange, there's a whole thing with Gary Young that's one of their, like a very famous Pavement in-store appearance. Yeah. And then they actually did play in Camden on Lollapalooza.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah, that was on the itinerary. They didn't do an interview with DRE, but I had to put myself in the movie somehow. Yeah. Other than the literal times I put myself in the movie.
Yeah. On that note, we got to turn over the theater, but I want to thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everybody. It'll be released in the spring.
Oh yeah, it'll be released in the spring, so please tell everyone you know.
Thanks for coming out.